Any sense on the turnout, or will we just know when they show up?
Says you're live, but minimal attendees.
Okay.
Yeah, the session is open, just people haven't come in yet. So you are on camera, so to speak.
Right.
Okay. Did you attend the previous talk by Professor Garrett Van Risen?
That question for me or one of us?
To all of you, I guess, but okay, I think we can get started. So welcome all to the panel on digitalization challenges and opportunities for small versus medium versus large retailers. So my name is Nirup Menon. I'm a professor here at Costello College of Business, and I have with me 4 wonderful panelists who are experts in the retail industry. I'll start with Brenda Allen Toon. She is a vice president of Consumer and Decision Sciences at ADUSA, Enterprise Strategy. Then we have Tad Wilson, who is the chief commercial officer at Smarter X, which is a Series A startup that keeps their pulse on consumer preferences and so on. And we also have Saras Yagna-Vajahala, who is the chief scientist at Oracle Retail Decision Intelligence. And we have Brian Coughlin, who is the distinguished engineer at Salesforce. So thank you all. So let's just jump right in with the questions. So my first question is kind of a continuation of what we heard about FBA from Garrett Van Risen at Amazon. So the first question is, what do retailers really see as the biggest challenges to e-commerce fulfillment? And if you can compare these challenges across small, medium, and large retailers, that will be helpful as well. So Brenda, since you're the voice of retailers here, can I start with you?
You sure can. Yeah.
Right.
Yes, I love how you frame this as e-commerce fulfillment. I think so at ADUSA, if you're not familiar actually with the ADUSA brands, we have 5 great local brands here on the East Coast, and they range in size. So if you're familiar with Food Lion, you can look up the number of sites of Food Lion stores versus Giant Food in Hannaford. We have pretty big varieties. So we actually, when we talk about small, medium, and large grocers, we kind of have that. We do have that scenario just within the 5 brands that we own and operate. And I think when it comes to the fulfillment side, so I think the question here more is on the end of the experience versus the beginning of the experience. But I'll just mention a little bit on it shows up actually in both points, which is I think we're all trying to adapt and change and understand as marketplaces, specifically DoorDash, Uber, as they scale their marketplaces and they change the value proposition that's available then to the consumer. That kind of gives us something to wrestle and wrangle with on the fulfillment side. Is it makes sense for us to actually partner with those marketplaces to extend kind of those unique propositions that they bring to our customers, does it or does not. So that's kind of one of our challenges that for them, particularly they have very high subscription models. There's some pros and cons to us as a business and our customers that come with the subscription models that they have. But I think if I'm laser focused more on the fulfillment angle, I think like every other grocer, we're still trying to figure out, just like everyone else, how do we make these options available to customers, and then how do we keep an eye to cost, right? So how do we protect that underlying operating profit that goes with making these available to our customers? But I think also kind of keep an eye on cost controls and kind of making sure, right? You think of like the average family, what are the things that they spend most of their money on in their household budgets? Food certainly being one of them. So we always have to have an eye to cost. How do we protect that? How do we make food available? So people it's accessible. And so I think that's one of our number ones. How do we, that balancing act of availability of the offering, but then kind of protecting just kind of cost controls and making sure we're giving the overall best value to our customers.
All right. Thank you, Brenda. So let's see. Let's go around the panel and see what opinions some others have as well.
I can jump in.
Oh, sure. Go ahead.
Yeah. So at Salesforce, one thing we're very keen on is a concept we call omni-channel. So trying to offer a consistent experience to customers, meaning not, our customers are the businesses like Brenda's, and then we worry about their customers as the consumer, right? So so when I say really end customers, we want the end customer experience to be as seamless as possible. Especially when there's usually a mix of an online experience and an in-person experience, particularly your retail. Unless it's like Amazon, and even then there's some in-person experience, like when you got to go to ship a package back, either at like a Whole Foods or a shipping center, right? So at Salesforce, we're very big on what we call omni-channel, where we want to make that experience for the customer seamless, regardless of which channel, where it's online, in person, something hybrid, they call on the phone, as possible, particularly because those experiences can change at different stages of the customer experience, customer journey, et cetera. So, and that's why that feeds into kind of the DNA of Salesforce around, if you know your customer well, then you can tailor those experiences in ways that make sense for whatever the consumer experience you're going after.
Okay, thank you. Tad?
Sure. I'll take a little bit of liberty with the definition of fulfillment and expand it to a fulfillment of the value prop. I think one thing that retailers have struggled with enormously is substitutions, which is a very personal thing. I may not care a whit between Heinz ketchup and another brand, whereas someone else has exactly a binary preference. It's a 1 or a 0. And I see a lot of nodding on the panel. We all know grocery as consumers, so it's like we live this experience. The other one is kind of some of the most profitable items on the grocery shelf or on the grocery aisles aren't planned purchases. It's I go and I spend time, getting a $2 can of something, and then I spend $10 on a half a pound of prepared food, which is incredibly high margin. You miss out on that in grocery e-com. So there are some things around the experience that have to be kind of figured in as, a potential cost or an impact on rev model. So far, haven't seen very elegant solutions for either of those. So there's a lot of experimentation, but I don't think we've hit equilibrium on what the quote unquote right answer is.
Thank you, Tad. And next, Saras.
Okay, sure. I think my colleagues covered a lot of great points. I just maybe add a little bit of a nuance that I think, and I would love to hear your thoughts on this, Brenda, if you're grappling with this as well as, some of the smaller and medium-sized grocers are trying to focus on the customer order capture side of things, right? And partnering with the DoorDashes and Instacarts to just help with that aspect. What they're also grappling with is they lose that connection with the customer, meaning they don't have information about who's purchasing what. So that kind of sets the stage for, a more direct engagement with their end consumers. So I don't know if that's something you've grappled with as well.
Yeah, I mean, it is actually, and it kind of is like, I was talking about, it's like, how do we, obviously the marketplaces, Instacart, DoorDash, and now Uber, they bring an interesting capability. It's not one that we have, particularly in logistics and last mile. It's not, a couple of our brands have had their own delivery, but two full out did not. And so they bring that interesting capability, but it's kind of it's a challenge for us, and kind of in the CVP, we're grappling with, we want to be there, you want to be present for the customer wherever they are. And if that's the platform there, you want to be present there. But it comes at a compromise for our ability actually to kind of give them an optimal customer experience where we can do the personalizations and customizations you want to do. And a great example that you mentioned, Tad, is substitutions. Like our ability to recommend a substitution for an item that we're out of stock on is better if we know more about you than if we don't. We know that you would never in your life substitute Hunts for Heinz. Like that's the kind of intelligence we have. So we wouldn't even suggest it. But it does, it leads to a not an optimal experience when we don't have that. So it is something that we wrestle with. I don't know that there's a right answer. But I think I kind of like the way we teed this up for small, medium, and large grocers. If you're a small grocer, you probably that is the partnership you need. You need those capabilities and competencies. When you're a large grocer, then it's a little bit trickier. You kind of you can build your own, you can do your own, or you can partner, and that's where it becomes more complicated. So.
And the other thing,
go
on
ahead,
the fulfillment, on the fulfillment side, I think what I have, talked to more sophisticated retailers, where the conversations go towards substitution, understanding, the basket itself, so that can, flow upstream in through the supply chain, and how they can actually drive efficiencies on the fulfillment side as well. So, yeah.
Yeah, thank you. So quickly recapping, so we covered something about the problem space, and we talked about like the cost and availability balancing. We talked about omni-channel. We talked about retailer substitution, on-plant purchases, the smaller and medium retailers trying to have partnerships, and we also talked about supply chain. So that's the very broad, I guess, problem space, and we are kind of trying to focus now back onto our digitalization and kind of ask about informational and other type of challenges. So let's start with, if forced to pick only one, should a retailer invest on consumer facing applications or associate facing applications? I'll just open it up and let I don't know, Cyrus, you want to take this?
Sure, I can get it started.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, that's an interesting question, actually. And from my experience in talking to many retailers across different sizes, I would say it depends, right? It depends on what is the biggest problem that they're facing, right? Obviously, consumer-facing technology means driving, a new revenue stream in many ways. Also driving the customer loyalty and engagement, that is going to be, that retailers see as being very important in the long run. But then on the associate facing side, they also are dealing with labor costs, which again can vary very significantly depending on the market they're in. The talent retention and so on. And there's a lot around, just shelf automation, replenishment automation, things like that can really enhance, just tackle very real problems like out of stocks and customer satisfaction in the long run. So it is that pivotal question that even I think Brenda touched upon, which is how do they grow sustainably? Like how do they grow profitably? And I think it really is going to be dependent on, if it is seen that margins are something that needs to be taken care of, which is a strategic initiative for the retailer, and they're seeing evidence that customers are coming in and they're seeing a significant issue about either whether it's labor or out of stock. I think then investing in the right store technology and associate facing technology makes sense. But I think retailers are also seeing as the customers changing, right? On the customers facing side, they want more and more in terms of how they interact with the retailers. Like digital coupons, online coupons is expected now as you go grocery shopping, right? And they want more and more personalization. I think with generative AI, the game is changing very soon, very in a big way. So, retailers know they cannot be left behind and then lose loyalty and long-term impacts around that. So it is a balancing act, but I think unless there is a burning, bleeding problem of margin, I do think they need to keep eyes open around, the customer demands and keeping up with from a technology standpoint.
Thank you, Cyrus. Tad, you want to take a stab?
Yeah, I would gently poke at the framing of the question.
Okay.
I think most consumer-facing challenges have an enterprise or an associate embedded sort of counterpart. So like an out of stock, it might be a consumer-facing problem, but it may also have to do with the fact that associates aren't aware that you have a problem with facings, or they don't know where in the stock room to go pick something. So I would
It's more
suggest
blended,
you
right?
focus
It's
on
not either or.
exactly. It's not an either or, and it's almost
Mm-hmm.
like we would probably not ask the question, which channel should you focus on? It's which challenge should you focus on that's customer defined, and then you solve it across channels. I think that might be the same for this particular type of question. But if you forced me, if you said we're going to kick you off the panel if you don't pick a consumer, I would be heterodox and I would pick associate, because I think retailers actually have more control over the associate side, and there's more gearing on margin there. That's, if forced to pick, that's where I would go.
Yeah, I'd like to add on to that too. Actually, one thing that we see with our customers in Salesforce is that when I say our customers, again, the businesses we support, is that if they have staff and associates or employees, however you want to say it, right, who are themselves empowered and in a positive frame of mind, a positive attitude, and that naturally translates to their interactions with customers and with partners, and that's often a very large step and a very positive step towards then. Sure, you can, if your business is executing well in that domain, then looking at consumer and customer facing applications and making their experience directly from a technology standpoint is sort of a logical next step, versus trying to go straight to the end consumer, even though you might have a great idea. But that's a lot more typical evolution we see with our customers. It's not to say these things again are black and white or either or. Typically we do some type of rationalization or ROI vetting process with our customers when we meet with them and say, what are your key business imperatives or your key strategic initiatives, and try and break those down and then decompose those into, well, how much of that initiative is going to be end consumer facing versus internally facing for your staff and your employees and your partners.
Thank you, Brian. So I think that was Cyrus said depends, Tad and Brian said more associate, I think leaning somewhat. So Brenda, you want to take sides?
Yeah, I don't know if I'm going to take a side, but I would just say kind of our vantage point in grocery, we'd probably lean more associate facing. Again, I think the reality that most of grocery is still in store versus online. That's where the overwhelming volume is. We have a lot of underserved population still. We have a lot of, if you think of all generations that are shopping for food, you think of food insecurity, those households generally have less reach and accessibility to digital solutions. So we tend to have to kind of think more broadly. We absolutely are focused on our digital customer. So very important, our e-commerce and our owned capabilities are very important to us. But when we start thinking more broadly of like, what do we do? What's our mission and purpose as grocers? It's about feeding and nourishing families. That tends to stick to the plane of like, where can we have the maximum impact, which is probably going to be more associate facing. So I had to pick one and go that way.
Yeah. So since it seems like most of you are saying associate facing, so I'm wondering how are business? I mean, obviously you wouldn't just throw technology on your existing people, right, or existing process. So how are some of the processes changing? And also, like Brenda, you mentioned that you are handling both digital customers as well as the other types of on the other digital divide type of customers. So how are you optimizing your business processes so that as you diffuse these technologies into your associates within the company, what are some of the changes that you've had to take? Maybe incentives for associates, how are they changing, and so on? Does anybody want to comment on that?
I'm pondering, I'm formulating. So yeah, somebody else go over first, please.
I would venture, like, just thinking about some of the ways technologies have been deployed in grocery. The experiments around using associate furnished devices versus store furnished devices, a little more prevalent in small box than say in grocery, just from the overall device management challenge. That's very interesting. Also, bringing associates in as stakeholders in the conversation around how to reframe a process and use tech to do it tends to be undervalued. And I say this as a former consultant, where we probably didn't do a great job up front of engaging the on the ground stakeholders. There are some notable retailers who have done a good job of piloting tech, put it out there, let associates play with it, or even let customers play with it, see what breaks, and then scale it up. None of that's rocket science. It feels like good project management and good change management. But it's definitely worth kind of having in mind. And then the last one I would throw out, and I think, our representative from Ahold Delhaize may be uniquely positioned to talk about it. How tech gets adopted varies by location. Like you look at the adoption, Japan was way ahead of the US in adopting mobile. China way ahead of the US in adopting e-com. Use of electronic devices in store was way ahead in Europe versus the US. So there's also some opportunity to deploy things in tech forward populations and just get a taste of it. So maybe that'll shake some ideas loose.
Yeah, one thing I'll add that a lot of people don't know with Salesforce is that we acquired Slack a few years ago, and so one of our biggest customers with Slack is HEB, a grocery retailer in Texas, and they rolled that out in basically like a weekend, like 72 hours. Again, it wasn't the thing with Slack is it's designed to be a sort of a fabric for your employees and your associates to communicate with one another. So it's not like an enterprise application for, I don't know, fulfillment or some specific use case necessarily. You can weave workflows into Slack, but it's a great kind of alternative to email, which doesn't really, make a lot of sense, especially with mobile and things like that. And Slack is much more immediate and conversational, and can also let people focus on the areas that fit them in their roles, and not, try and filter out other things. So there's lots of different ways for these, there's lots of different categories of applications, and Salesforce is in many of these different spaces. So people sometimes just think of Salesforce as just CRM, but things like, particularly over COVID, even internally within Salesforce, we pretty much ran our business on Slack because everyone suddenly, was back in their home and, all that. And it was just a necessity, so we see a lot of partners and customers using Slack, both for internal communication and coordination, but also it has external capabilities as well. I won't turn this into a product pitch, but it's Slack is really flexible and powerful, and especially if your associates or your staff don't feel very networked with one another, and there's value to be gained from that. I think it's a really good starting point, or can be.
So, suppose I take the discussion in a slightly different direction and bring it down to like micro, let's say mom and pop kind of a store selling something, because our center would like to serve our local industry of mom and pop stores. So what do you think they should get any of these technologies? Or should they just focus on building face-to-face relationships?
Yeah, I would think certainly for a smaller, smaller outfit like that, they have to be more selective, I would think, because there's just not enough hours in the day for them to run their business and necessarily venture into too many new areas. I'm actually, I think it's later this week, I'm doing a kind of capstone Shark Tank style judging it for a different George Mason course in the IT program, where they worked with these small like, hairdressers and mechanics and shops around Fairfax County, and they try and apply IT to their business. And the challenge is more, not so much like what can the tech do, but how much bandwidth these small businesses have to take on and manage new technologies themselves when they're, busy enough just kind of, keep opening their shops every day and, paying their bills and doing with their customers. So it is, I definitely have a lot of empathy for that, but not necessarily a magic bullet answer. I'll put it that way.
Do you all have solutions for them? Do you sell to mom and pop stores?
We can. It's Salesforce is priced by the number of users. So a 5-user, enterprise, company or, retailer, whatever it is, pays obviously a lot less than Coca-Cola with, hundreds of thousands of employees. So we can, but so again, I'm not worried about the technology so much. It's just that you have to pick your battles, I think, with smaller customers, because they have their hands full just day to day. So.
Yeah, I kind of want to go back to, I kind of liked actually the framing of the answer, and like, what are we solving for? And then I think just in full disclosure, because I have the consumer population, I actually have a counterparty actually that is all of our associate facing tools. So it's not something that's in my practice, but I think it goes back down to like, how do you deal with it, how you wrestle it with your associate population? I mean, it's the classic, like, UXR, usability, what are we solving for? What's the experience? Does it actually meet their need? And is it actually seamless for them? I think the classic and the fundamentals of what are we solving for, and is it actually useful, and therefore will be used? That's kind of how we approach technology, and my counterpart would approach it that way. So we have the luxury of having a usability team for our associates. So.
Yeah, and adoption, right? You don't try and necessarily solve everything in one go, right? You should phase things, maybe have a pilot group or something if that makes sense. And then if it succeeds at that level, then you can scale it out.
Yeah.
So since we are talking about associate-facing technologies, can we dig a little bit deeper into that and ask, what are some of these disruptive technologies or data or insights that you are seeing that have the potential to change the game in current retail process, like, for example, assortments, planograms, supply chain, etc.?
I mean, no points for throwing out use of AI, but spotting.
I could talk about it, but I'll let you guys go first.
I mean, like spotting empty facings, making choices about, all right, if I have an empty facing, do I fill with existing product? Do I swap? Do I extend from side? Like, there's a lot of real-time decision making that has an inherently localized bias to it. Like, you might have a different answer to the same question in a different store, or even at a different time of week, depending on when the trucks show up. I think that democratization of what really requires some pretty powerful analytics and also a relatively healthy state of data hygiene. And I promise I'm not on the payroll of either Oracle or Salesforce, but like, this is the truth.
No, I'm agreeing with you.
Yeah. I mean, we do have a solution to do just that for we call it planogram optimization, but essentially it is making, and to your point, Tad, it is, whole numerically combinations of options that need to be analyzed. And then you throw substitutability into the mix, and it becomes a combinatorily hard problem. Do I give it an additional facing? Do I flip the, stack it? Do I, change the orientation to make more space, and then drive the overall revenue and space productivity from the planogram? So yeah, definitely AI and optimization can really help here. I think there are many, just looking ahead though, like 4-5 years out, there's so much innovation happening with edge, with cloud, on the AI front as well, that I think there can be more done around not just planogram compliance, but just automating, tying it, integrating it back into restocking the products on the shelf, and just really taking that day-to-day onus away from the store associates, right? So yeah, I think there's a lot that can be done, and exciting times ahead for us, I guess.
The sales perspective on that is similar to, there's a reason like Microsoft and Salesforce are as well, where a lot of our AI products we're marketing under the concept of a co-pilot, either directly in the branding or how it works, because the idea that you just want to turn on, particularly a generative AI, and just have your customer like interact with that in a chatbot, which is technically possible, and people are doing that, but this is definitely one of those cases where you'd rather do something that's associate or staff facing, and the co-pilot concept is you're giving them an aid to accelerate or improve their ability to do their job. But at the same time, you're giving them some oversight, because these generative AI models are powerful, but there's still risk of hallucinations or lack of context. And you could get very not great answers sometimes out of these AI algorithms. And so you want a human being to vet that and make an informed decision, or what Tab was saying too, around local circumstances that the AI might not be able to take into account. So there's a lot of variables right now. So there's a lot of interest in experimentation, but it's definitely a journey. I think this is, I think we're going to be talking about AI and how to apply it and best practices for at least a decade or more. And even I'm just talking about generative. A lot of customers could, if they haven't done predictive AI or don't have mature analytics, they don't have the data foundations anyway to do AI properly. So we actually have what we call kind of an AI or analytic maturity model concept with our customers. And if they're not progressing along that, last thing we want to do is have them go from no AI to like, oh, let's throw out some, moonshot AI project, and try and deploy that in 6 months. So anyway, so we're trying to be very, cautious, but in a constructive and informative way, not just, Chicken Little cautious. So.
Yeah, and something related to what Saras mentioned about the problems being really complex. We have a question on the from the audience. Says, from my retailer IT experience, there's a huge gap between how quickly data is coming in versus how quickly data store operations can actually do something about it. How have you dealt with that gap between faster data and real world operations?
I'll just comment in general that I'm seeing that type of problem with a lot of Salesforce customers. It varies by industry and things like that. But some of the companies that are state of the art with that kind of thing, not necessarily a Salesforce customer, are the the Ubers of the world, because they're relatively new and they've ramped up with this idea of more of a real-time feedback loop with their data and their ridership and their drivers. A lot of retail is typically an older industry, and so those kinds of infrastructure and sort of feedback loop channels with regard to data and analytics just aren't there yet. And so you have to kind of, again, that's part of that maturity model I was talking about. Is there's a maturity in terms of awareness and understanding how to apply the technology, and maturity and capability of building the infrastructure to create these kind of capabilities, and hopefully you're using them along the way too. Like I said, don't want any of these things to be moonshot projects. So it's definitely an evolution. Yeah, I see Saras nodding her head because and you're Brenda as well. You're living it. So go ahead.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Saras, and then we're Brenda. Yeah.
Okay.
Go ahead, Saras.
Yeah, I mean, we do have a lot of retailers on legacy systems, and data latency is a serious issue. I think what we've been kind of talking through them about is, it doesn't, before crawl, walk, run, better than real time is, I'd say, right time, right? So even if you have more frequent uploads of data, but you're getting the right information at the right time, that is, driving value for the key decisions that need to be made. That's one way of looking at things. So yes, it's been an evolution, and I think with retailers realizing what can be done with AI and ML, I think it's putting a bigger onus on them to invest in the right systems and kind of upgrade their systems to be more data current. But I think there's a journey here.
Oh, I think
Brenda,
you're
muted.
Brenda.
Yeah.
Oh, let me just. Can you?
Thank you. I must have muted myself. I think we have a lot of use case. Obviously, we have a lot of real-time data or transactional data. That's real-time data. So I think a lot of times when people ask us, we have real-time data, what they're asking for is, do we have real-time decisioning? And kind of like to the points that we've already talked about. In some cases we do, in some cases we don't. We either are this piece of data actually to make a decision takes this, and that system doesn't refresh at the same rate that this one does. Or combined, actually, we need to then layer in some other decisioning, and that process either doesn't exist today, we're missing the attribution to do it. So, but it is actually one like the common use case in grocery is fast-moving items, right? We have a lot of items that in a physical world, which does impact e-commerce for us too. The velocity of them is such that you don't have ample shelf space, right? That's a common one. It's a common use case for real-time data. Can we have real-time data? Send alerts, hey, the shelf probably empty. And that seems like a good idea, but it's dependent on having real-time inventory that reflects real-time shrink. So kind of all the common things that we talked about. So, but I think our desire and appetite for real-time data, same kind of as everyone else, but it's a journey. And I kind of, to your point though, is like when you associate facing tools versus customer facing tools, this is a good example where if that's where we would lean to an associate facing tool in this use case, because the customer is only kind of trying to inquire like where else may a product be in the store when they can't find the one that they want to begin with, right? So we're trying to solve a customer problem, whereas if you actually had the associate facing tool and solved it first, then for the customer it shouldn't exist. So it's just my point of view.
Thank you, Brenda. Okay. Talking about, so let's talk about, here I'm going through my questions here, looking for, okay, how are retailers mixing, matching, and making interoperable various on-premises cloud and mobile solutions to create custom solutions that give them a competitive edge beyond the advantage of good products? So, one of the things that's been argued a little bit is if you buy all this technology from let's say, sorry to put you on the spot here, but Oracle and Salesforce,
That's fine.
all it gives me is the same thing that everybody else has. So it doesn't give me a competitive advantage, right? So maybe the retailer should be somehow orchestrating a specific mix of these different tools that give them uniqueness to succeed in the market. What are your I guess advice to the to small, medium, and large retailers on this?
That's a great question.
Well, I will politely disagree with you. Again, a hallmark of what Salesforce is about is letting customers use our products as platforms and tailor them towards their business and towards their brand. So that we very much want to feel like we're their partner in differentiating their particular business and their particular value propositions. And I'm not saying that that's the original idea. I mean, Saras is nodding her head too. So, this is not meant to be, negative against our competition, right? But that's typically our perspective is to be a partner with the customer as much as an enabler, and then be on the journey with them towards, again, whatever their key goals or pain points to overcome, or key markets they're trying to expand or break into, whatever those key points are. So,
Brian,
I think Brian, we lost you.
I think that's the universe telling us it's time to hear from Oracle.
I think that's fine. Yeah.
I think, Brian, I have a feeling your Bluetooth may have cut out or something.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Now, yes.
Yeah, it literally did. Zoom for some reason switched me to Teams audio, so I blame it on Microsoft. I don't know why. I have a Teams virtual audio device that I need to deinstall. But anyway, so I'm not sure where I cut out, but basically, we want to be part of that customer's journey. And the good news is that that's what a part of our conversation of that rationalization process, or that engagement process that we're talking about earlier, is not just understanding our customers' goals, but also where they want to make those investments, more towards mobile. And it could be mobile, but associate facing, right? That could be very empowering, because then the associate doesn't feel like they're chained to their laptop at a desk. Or it could be mobile and customer facing. And we actually have a way, this is one example, we can let customers deploy an app on the Google and Apple app stores using a Salesforce framework, such that they don't have to go into the business developing their own custom mobile app. They basically use Salesforce as a platform, and they put their logos on it. And then we essentially facilitate the sort of packaging of that app on those app stores without them having to, know how to do like low-level coding. So anyway, again, these are all just options. I'll stop there. I don't want to turn this into a deep dive on the product. So.
Yeah, just to add, I mean, I agree with you wholeheartedly. We do get this request all the time. Retailers, there's never a one solution that fits all. So what we have, what Oracle offers is, of course, SaaS, cloud-based solutions, but with the platform for extensibility. So you can, use our SaaS solutions as a starting point and extend them in our cloud using our OCI cloud infrastructure to then build your own. For example, we have many customers taking our core products like our merchandising and omni-channel suite of products, and then building on top of it a vendor collaboration portal, for example, that meets their unique needs. Data science is, one great perfect example where we've really seen that variation, right? So we've got the small and medium retailers where our SaaS solutions with embedded science in them works perfectly. It allows them to get quick value, and everything is plug and play. But when it comes to, I would say the tier one and the super tier one retailers, of course, they have their large data science teams, and with the extensibility that the platform offers, they can get started with our models, build them out, extend them out, and then bring their own unique data science solution and embed them into our applications with APIs and extensibility. So it's a very open model, and totally relate to this, where it's never a one solution that fits all, and I think we are geared to support that for our customers.
Thank you, sir. Ted or Brenda, did you want to add anything on this about competitive advantage from technology or from your analytics?
I'm glad you opened the door to analytics. Obviously, but based on the nature of my role, it's probably obvious that I would be out of my skis if I talked about the technology side. That's not my wheelhouse. It's not what I do for the organization. But from where I can see between our collectively and what we know about our customer, our legacy, we have brands. We have 3 brands that are over 100 years old. We've got a lot of legacy, a lot of 40, 50-year team members actually across those brands. So when you combine that with what we know about our customers, we have pretty big loyalty programs that we run in all 5 brands, and a nice, robust, and passionate data sciences team. I think for us, we think that the difference is actually probably those competencies and capabilities and our intelligence about our customer and desire to make it good and make it right for them. So
it's an interesting question. Like, just thinking with a classically trained strategy hat on, competitive advantage has to come from something unique. Either you're doing something better or you're doing something cheaper. And tech is an enabler of that. But very rarely is it a unique moded source of being able to do that. Like our company uses AI to generate product classifications for hazardous products like in seconds, and it used to take weeks and months. Ultimately, the user doesn't care. What they care about is, did they get it fast? Did they get it accurate? I think a lot of tech is that way. It's a means to an end, and it becomes surface when you're doing design decisions, but it gets sublimated into what is this process achieving? What's the business outcome? And so that kind of suggests that having flexibility, headless versus trapped in tech, those kind of things are important.
So yeah, let's talk about the analytics capability. And one of the questions that I have, and forgive my ignorance on this, is that suppose you get purchase data from customers, and let's say you spend a year and a half cleaning it, creating models around it, and then another 6 months to whatever to glean any kind of findings, conclusions. Isn't the conclusions now too old? Isn't it outdated?
I'll say something quick and then let the data experts really jump in.
Okay.
I've seen a shift in consumers and users of data on the retail side where you have the concept of data as truth, and then there's the concept of data as signal. And I'm starting to see the concept of data as signal starting to win out. So everyone kind of understands that what you get is there's a direction, but there's also a confidence on it. And if you have to wait a year to get 100% confidence about what the signal is, it's worthless. And so some of these trade-offs in how do you consume and interpret are starting to become more surface. And I would actually credit the usage of Gen AI becoming more surface for that. Like folks that use machine learning for assortment planning and pricing and that kind of stuff are very fluent in these concepts. Gen AI has sort of gotten us to the point where we're like, this sounds like legit signal. How much do I trust it? And it's actually making us more savvy data consumers. So I'll just throw that out and get some of the input from the other actual data people here.
Yeah, one thing I'm tracking, because again, this is a start of I think we're on like mile 1 of the marathon with some of this stuff. Is to the point of signal, right? Is that once you start having a feedback loop with these different data sources, I mean, you might get a particular signal or a particular insight right now, but you know the data is inherently, if it has any ground truth, it's going to be different 6 months from now or 12 months from now. Like, you know, think about the environment now versus in the heart of COVID, right? You know, anyone's going to have vastly different data, I would think, in this industry between, you know, then and now, and certainly pre-COVID. So part of the whole part of the value, I think, of signal and why that's a useful concept is that, you know, inherently the world and the environment and your customers, all those things are going to be evolving. And so we want to try and have some better insight into that, but you obviously can't assume that what's true now or true 12 months ago is going to stay that way necessarily, other than the fact that you're going to hopefully start refining those competitive advantages, Tad, that you're talking about, that should be inherently some kind of differentiator that's, you know, unique to that business, and not, you know, again, not just a product from a vendor. So
yeah, I think, Niru, what you just described is a typical data science project, right? It takes a long time to get data, garbage in, garbage out. Spend a lot of time cleaning up the data, and retailers' data, historical data, is notoriously bad, as Tad touched upon it as well. And then you get some predictive power from the models, and 6 months have passed before you know it. And that's the typical data science project. And I think that is why most businesses, and I don't think it's just retailers, I think it's across the industry. I've worked with certain other industries as well. That's why we've struggled from a POC phase to productionization phase, if that makes sense, for data science and the AI recommendations. Now, where we've had success, as Tad pointed out, is some of those old-time AI services, right? Pricing, price optimization, assortment optimization, forecasting. These have been around for a long time. And the way we've kind of built these out is, automated data feeds, right? Every week, every night, we correct the data, we fix the missing data, synthesize the data, and then highly performing models that are able to build and give daily, weekly predictions that then drive optimization solutions to make the right pricing, assortment decisions, inventory optimization, etc. So it comes back to the whole right time decisions point, right? So that is the hard part, though, for innovation, is going from that POC phase to the productionization, operationalization phase, and then that feedback loop, right, where you can actually measure the benefits from the decisions you made, from the recommendations that the AI has given versus what you were doing without those recommendations. So it is a full data science loop. So but it is challenging, but I think that's the business we are in at Oracle, which is delivering productionized data science that at scale.
Thank you, Saras. Brenda.
Yeah, so the thing actually is I was kind of listening to you all talk, and I think it's a kind of just like a kind of one of the nice things that we have that we've kind of maintained and protected in ADUSA is that, well, we have 5 great local brands, and we have centralized a lot of our analytics and data sciences. We actually have been pretty intentional that we've also maintained tight linkages with our brands, and particularly like operations, supply chain, people that are really kind of boots on the ground, like that high business context. So I think in the example that you painted, Nira, but like the thing that flagged for me is like how connected or how much business context do those data owners have to actually, right, is that they lose their predictive power, not because the data is dated, but they just don't have that connection of the business context to have stayed current, to know kind of what changed and what not, and improve its predictability. And so that was the first thing, is like that context piece. In our center of excellence in data and analytics, we have a team, and it's actually one of the teams that I have, we have very high connections with the brands. Like we sit with our brand partners in strategy and marketing and operations, and that's somewhat intentional. It benefits our ability in our advanced analytics and data sciences practices because we have a fabric that can put together and keep the business context. Because otherwise it would be, you'd have, if you had that data and you'd collected it and been some time, you to know its real-time relevancy would be difficult. Our operators, on the other hand, they see the real time, but they've kind of lost sense of the historical because, 4 weeks ago was like forever ago in operations. And so I think being very intentional, having those two spheres interact, I think is what you need.
I think that's a great point, Brenda, and a learning point for me as well. Yeah, so that that business people need to evaluate that finding in their own context rather than the data scientist trying to just purely evaluate it in the context of the technique that they used.
I think a relevant example we've just cycled on a year ago were SNAP benefits. Actually, we had COVID SNAP benefits and the final pandemic era benefits ended just a year ago. And so if you were in grocery and you were in operations, like you saw that immediately. But we did actually have some downstream analytics users that, 3-4 months, they started looking at trend lines and they're like, whoa, what happened? You're like, oh, well, this was that event. Like if you were in operations, you knew it, you weren't asking questions about it. But sometimes in that trail of data evidence, if you were kind of further down, you may not have realized it. And then all of a sudden you saw 10% reduction in something you didn't know why. So.
Yeah. So we are at time. So I appreciate your time, Brenda, Cyrus, Brian, and Ted. Thank you so much for coming on and taking your time with us, chatting with us. I've learned a lot. Thank you so much.
Thank you. It's nice to be on with you.